In August 1967, an American spy satellite took some sensational pictures. A gigantic machine that looked like a plane was seen flying over the waters of the Caspian Sea. It was 100 meters long, weighed about 500 tons, and was traveling at more than 500 kilometers per hour. Nothing like it had ever been seen before. It was the KM, one of the Soviet military's most secret projects. When the news came out, the Western press was quick to pick up on its nickname, the Caspian Sea Monster. Stefan Hooker was one of the first people to see these images. A former analyst with the Defense Intelligence Agency, he now lives in retirement in Washington, D.C. He remembers being very impressed by pictures of the unknown Soviet machine flying low over the Caspian Sea.
When we were looking at it, one of my colleagues, we were three of us looking at it, and my colleague said, "Oh my gosh, it's a monster," meaning it was a big aircraft. And without thinking, I just reacted by saying, "Monster, water." I said, "Oh, Loch Ness Monster." And the third colleague looked at me puzzled and said, "How can it be Loch Ness Monster? It's in the Caspian Sea. It must be Caspian Sea Monster."
The object that so alarmed the Americans was developed by Rastislav Alexeyev. He worked in the city of Gorky, an out-of-bounds zone in the central European part of Russia. The city was later renamed Nizhny Novgorod. When Alexeyev started working in the shipbuilding industry, sailing speeds were relatively low. Water resistance slowed everything down. He came up with an idea that changed the way we think about water-going vessels. He suggested attaching underwater wings to them. The idea was the wings would push the craft out of the water once it was going fast enough. It was a real breakthrough. At a stroke, the new design radically cut water resistance. Soon after, high-speed vessels with underwater wings were sailing the seas and lakes of the Soviet Union. Their inventor was obsessed with velocity. His machines were capable of speeds up to 100 kilometers an hour. That's about 55 knots. He had a brainwave to get them to go even faster. It involved not just lifting them up out of the water, but getting them to rise above it altogether.
I can tell you that Alexeyev was a very resourceful person, and he was always coming up with new ideas. We were indeed astonished when he invited us for the first time and told us about his idea of using air wings. We knew underwater wings had speed limitations, but air wings meant an airplane.
Alexeyev was on fire with the idea of giving the Soviet Union a new kind of transport based on the mysterious ground effect phenomenon. He envisioned a vehicle capable of traveling over water and land. No one believed it could really work. But Alexeyev persisted and managed to persuade Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev to back his project. The government wanted a device that would give the Soviet Union superpower status on the seas. To that end, the new vessel would have to be large, powerful, and capable of high speeds. According to Alexeyev, the ekranoplan, or screen effect vehicle, met all of the requirements. The next step was to find a suitable location to test it. Alexeyev was personally involved in the search. The task wasn't easy. They needed a secluded place, far away from cities and the prying eyes of strangers. They needed a wide expanse of water where high-speed maneuvers could be carried out. They settled on Chkalovsk, a town in the Nizhny Novgorod region. It became the test site for all the ekranoplan models. Valery Neverov, an expert in ekranoplan tests, is in the wind tunnel. Here they call him the best measurement man.
Is everything ready there?
Ready.
Let's launch.
Since nothing like the ekranoplan existed before, engineers had to build a special tunnel to test them. The so-called ground effect is created by passing air between the metal shield and the craft model.
A long time ago, when the aircraft industry was in its infancy, planes had weak engines and very long wings. Now those aircraft had trouble landing. The planes were often unable to stick to the ground while landing, and they had to be kept down using the rudder. Quite often, that caused plane crashes. And that is how the so-called ground effect was discovered.
This is the Alexeyev Research and Construction Center. It's in the city of Nizhny Novgorod. These walls kept the secret for several decades. The principles of a new kind of transport were developed here. A fully equipped water tank for tests has been built.
What's the speed?
It's 5 meters per second.
They studied the so-called ground effect here, using test models. The ground effect, or thick air, takes place when flying at more than 80 kilometers per hour over water. The ground effect creates enough thick air for the plane to float over the water. Alexander Bazhenov has spent all of his life near the Chkalovsk base. He's free to fish here now, but in the past he wasn't allowed anywhere near it. The area was off limits, used for secret tests for future ekranoplans.
The model lifted up for about 6 meters, and then it suddenly hit the water. There was a terrific bang, and the model broke in two, and it sank.
One after another, the various ekranoplans were tested at Chkalovsk. The whole operation was conducted in secrecy. Finally, the KM, which means dummy ship in Russian, was ready. It took 4 years to build. The first test on the Caspian Sea was scheduled to take place in 1966. The body of the KM ekranoplan was brought down the Volga River in secret. Its wings were detached, and it was only moved at night. The body was covered with a veneer casing, concealing what was beneath. It took a whole month to move it to the Caspian Sea. In the Cold War, the development of a new piece of military hardware was a closely guarded secret. Ironically, the ekranoplan remained a mystery only to the residents of the USSR. In the United States, a special group was organized to decode the satellite images of the Caspian Sea monster. Analysts from the Defense Intelligence Agency met to identify the strange object in the pictures. What did it do? Why did the Russians build it?
From these very early overhead pictures, I was able to, we were all able to discern what it looked like. And the way the aircraft appeared was that it had these short, stubby wings like this. It had some engines up in the front like this, and this tail. In a normal airplane, any normal airplane that you are accustomed to seeing like this, you see a tail of a certain proportion of the wing. So by taking this proportion, i.e. this amount of area, I added more wing in this way. And now I have an airplane that looks conventional. If I then examined this airplane technically and looked at the range and other factors, this amount of area was too much, too large, for the weight of the aircraft. So it suggested these did not belong. And so that the real article, the real Caspian Sea monster, or KM, was in fact correctly what we were seeing in the overhead photography. So it was a question of what does this do? And this, we know, can't fly very well in high flight like the aircraft.
The US intelligence officers came to one conclusion. This machine couldn't fly. But fly it did, despite their calculations. Vladimir Loginov was at the controls of the Caspian Sea monster on the day it was photographed by the US spy satellite.
How does it feel? It feels all right. Of course, something is special here. My eyes get tired when moving close to the water. You have to watch the height and the speed. And you have to watch the course of the movement by the compass. And other displays. You have to maintain radio communication and also to navigate. You have to look ahead to avoid hitting any obstacles. At times you meet not only the big ships, which are obvious in the water, but the small boats as well, and they are hard to notice.
Alexeyev learned how to fly the plane in order to be able to test his ekranoplans. The designers were strictly forbidden from taking part in test flights. The reason was to avoid putting their lives in danger. On a number of occasions, Loginov broke that rule.
I took Alexeyev on board because he created this machine. It was his brainchild. He needed to feel how this machine was behaving while flying. He was able to further improve the design because of that. So that's why I took him on board.
The Caspian Sea Monster was a prototype for all the ekranoplans. A troop-carrying model was constructed later. It was called Orlyonok, which means the eagle in Russian. Its purpose was to take soldiers and equipment to war zones. It was also capable of mounting surprise attacks. The ekranoplan is invisible to radar. It can also fly over minefields. In 1974, the Orlyonok was undergoing testing in rough seas. A wave struck the craft, breaking its body. Alexeyev was on board at the time. He took the controls, steering the craft safely back to base. Those on shore were astonished. Sections of the stern and tail were missing. The crash, it seemed, proved the ekranoplan's viability. But the accident was bad news for Alexeyev. It was used as an excuse to dismiss him as chief designer.